Western civilization is moving closer to a point of irreconcilable, unstable equilibrium, as frighteningly increasing numbers of people trust nothing. Media, academia, and especially the governments are no longer held in high esteem. Regaining trust is often impossible after betrayal. However, transparency is essential to any healing process, and that is the essence of the Don Sullivan Show. Please listen to the team explore, probe, and debate cutting-edge science, technology, and computing. Play ball!
Welcome to a very special episode of the Don Sullivan Show. As you can hear, Don is currently on the road, and you're going to learn more about that very shortly. I'm your co-host, Jersey Steve. First, we want to thank our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by License Fortress, the industry's first and only software asset management firm to offer both a financial and legal guarantee at its highest level of service. Whether it's Oracle, Microsoft, or VMware, License Fortress helps organizations stay compliant, avoid audits, and save money. You can learn more at licensefortress.com. And please support our producer, our wonderful producer, Bill Axt, by visiting axtinc.com. That is AXTINK.com. You can subscribe to his YouTube channel and help support his efforts to create humorous animation, as well as run our website, all while researching a cure for baldness.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Don Sullivan Show for another episode of the show that discusses science, technology, and computing on all possible levels and focuses on the average American teenager. We want everyone to be able to understand every subject that we discuss under that broad umbrella, or really discuss everything so that average smart American 18-year-old can understand everything that we are discussing and can take with them throughout whatever educational experiences they have, academic or otherwise. And I emphasize that point today because I'm going to do something very special in the sense that we're going to discuss what happens to the average American teenager who is an athlete later in life. And we will have a lot of fun discussion around it, but it's also very, very serious as well. And it's something that's particularly serious in other sports other than what we're going to actually focus on at the moment, but we'll get to that. So sometime in the 1960s, both myself and today's guest, Mr. Leon Jones, decided to embark upon a series of careers in athletics. Now, sports is a combination of physical endeavor, emotional endurance, spiritual commitment with a touch of artistic creativity. Leon and I experienced very successful overlapping track and field careers at the University of Virginia. But those successful athletic endeavors had eventual results that we are going to discuss in probably more detail than you necessarily want to hear at the moment. Particularly in these athletic careers, as I say, notice it was plural, we had second and third careers. They particularly could have consequences. Leon became a world-class bodybuilder and then as a champion masters rower. And you all know about me, but Leon is the Bionic Man, and we're going to have these discussions. So before I get into discussion with Leon, I have to, again, do this every time, read the waiver that our many lawyers require me to read. I'm getting tired of it, admittedly. But all statements by the hosts and the guests of the Don Sullivan Show are the personal opinions of the host and the guests, who all agree that the following content is the property of Xanalytics LLC, to be used publicly and exclusively on the Don Sullivan Show. And everybody here, including the vast audience in this studio that we're in, is shaking their heads as if they understand it. So now on to the consequences. The fixes, basically the bionic part of today's show. So, Leon, please introduce yourself and talk about how we met, and then we'll get into some of the things that we were able to accomplish and some of the things that it cost us.
I'm Leon Jones. I met Don back in 1980.
Yeah.
I was in my third year at University of Virginia running track, and Don was first year. He and I and one other fellow, we became pretty fast friends and spent a lot of time on the road running, a lot of time on the track running, a lot of time competing against each other.
So, by the way, Leon, the vast audience of the Don Sullivan Show knows Dr. Theo Hodge, who was already
Yes, he was the third musketeer in this scenario, and so we ran together for 2 years, and I moved on to other things, and Don continued his, and then we both left college and not being content to just kind of fade into the sunset, we both continued being very active. And as I brought injuries into my running career, which later came back to manifest again because I continued to push my body rather than do the typical American thing, which was to kind of sit back and become old. And as a result of that, pre-existing injuries and then new injuries kind of started cropping up. And when I got to my 40s, they all started really cropping up. And at that time, you have to start doing things about them. So thanks to modern medicine, get patched up and get back on the road to activity.
So Leon, the audience already knows that I'm an insurance company's nightmare. And I've had multiple surgeries on both ankles, both knees, both shoulders. I've had a heart attack, and I still climb mountains. And I'm doing very well with it. I'm in pretty good shape these days. And that's mostly because, thankfully, I was exiled from Silicon Valley. So, Leon, let's talk a little bit about some of the injuries and fixes you had in your second athletic career as a bodybuilder. What happened there?
Well, bodybuilding, the big injury that I had.
Leon was big and strong, by the way. There's a 46 quarter mile, but he was big and strong by the time we hit 1983-4.
So I had a pre-existing knee injury from high school football.
Football? You get injuries in football? Okay.
A little smidge. So I had a pretty good cartilage tear. And back in the dark ages, not only did they use leeches, but they believed in taking the entire cartilage out, the whole meniscus out. So at 17, I was bone on bone.
Pliers work really well for that.
Yeah, and a good leather strap to chew on while they pull it out. But all kidding aside, it was pretty prehistoric surgery by today's standards. So I was bone on bone at 17 and continued to play football, continued to run track, and then went on to the UVA, as we mentioned, and ran there. And so by the time I got to bodybuilding, my knee was already had 5 surgeries. Clean outs, basically. They go in and clean it out and take bone spurs out.
And this, by the way, folks, is before name, image, and likeness. And so,
yes,
even though they were paying a tuition, they certainly weren't paying us to do this.
No.
This was for the love of competing. And even though we were done with track and field, we were both doing other things. I'm coaching and running against the kids that I was coaching, and Leon is becoming Mr. Universe.
And so I started bodybuilding and was lifting probably more than my bone structure could really handle.
Probably.
And I was doing, I was doing 3 sets of 7 with 300 on the bar, and squatting,
squatting,
benching, squatting.
My favorite exercise for your knees, squatting.
Yeah, squatting in the 400s, and I was throwing some serious weight around, and more than my bone structure could really handle. But you can't tell a 25-year-old who's decided he doesn't want to get old that. So I did that until it became obvious that to get any further in the sport, I was going to have to steroid. So that ended that, and I moved on to becoming a competitive slalom water skier. But let me back up a minute. So all that heavy benching, all that heavy squatting. I blew my shoulders out. I now have one working rotator cuff in each shoulder. And my knee continued to get worse and worse and worse.
What about the replacement parts? Any replacement parts in there yet?
Oh yeah, not at this point. So they go. They basically told me I went finally at 40. They said we can't operate on you anymore and give you any more results because we've done everything we can do, short of replacing your knee. But you're too young. Come back and see us when you're 50. So from 40.
And by the way, I attended Leon's 40th birthday party, and the first thing he said at his Florida home when I walked in the door, he said, "Don, I am going to be dragged kicking and screaming into my 40s." And I think the screaming part was definitely true.
Yeah, it's more. Yeah, so was the drag part. So at any rate, so I had a knee that was just shot, and so I gave up all the heavy duty lifting, all of that kind of thing. But I got into competitive slalom water skiing and went as far as I could go with a knee that I could only bend to about 90 degrees, and did that.
Hey, some people don't even have 90, all right? You know.
And did that and continued to blow my shoulders out doing that. If you know anything about competitive slalom water skiing, you really get a good yank on your shoulders. And so those, long story short, I was continuing in my 40s to just grind my body.
His wife was really happy about this. I know that for a fact.
And so finally, I hit 50, the age they told me to come back and see him. I went back and saw him, and they said, "Yeah, your knee is shot. We'll replace it. You know, we've got better technology now." And so they did.
Better technology. We can rebuild him. $6 million man. I hate to tell you, that doesn't buy a toe these days, but go ahead.
Yeah, just for inflation, please. So they replaced, total knee replacement. Knee was shot. But I was back on my ski in 8 weeks, and I was competing again in 12 weeks. And so I went on with that. Unfortunately, about 3 months later, I took a really nasty spill and shattered my left ankle. And this is only 3 months after having had that knee totally, replaced. So now I broke my tibia, fibia, talus, tore every ligament, ruptured the posterior tibial tendon, and was in surgery for 2 hours. So at that point, my then wife said, "Find a new sport or find a new wife."
She wasn't kidding. And keep in mind, we're not medical students. So we're not supposed to know about all of these bones and stuff. We just do because, keep going, Leon.
So I did just that. I decided, I guess I'll find a new sport. So I got into competitive rowing. I lived on the water, and I wanted to do something that would be vigorous and challenging. And I put a trash bag over my cast and taught myself to row. And within about 3 years, I was competing and doing quite well. That really didn't damage me too much more, other than the fact that it just accentuated what I already had going on. So long story short, here I am today with an ankle that needs to be re-operated on a second time. In the meantime,
so what's in your ankle right now?
A bunch of screws and plates and nuts and bolts, and some of that hardware is migrated into the joint space, which is making life very difficult. So I'm going to have a second surgery.
His ankle doesn't look very good at the moment. Yes, this is where the bionic part comes in.
And so for the first time, I'm feeling my age. Thank you, ankle. And so I'm going to have that redone. I'm going to have a series of 2 operations to fix the deformity in the foot, and then a year later actually do an ankle replacement. So I'll have yet a third joint.
A year between them, you think?
That's what the
surgeon. You go through all of the physical therapy, which everyone should do as much as possible.
Amen.
And every insurance company should be approving a lot more. That's my public service announcement. Continue, Leon.
Well, I would just say amen, an exclamation point on that. It's all about the rehab. At any rate, so now I'm basically a basket of
Nuts and bolts.
And in the meantime, I had my hip replaced.
Oh, of course, there was that. I haven't had that done, by the way, audience. I haven't. My hips are good.
And that was just the result of just a cumulative, wear and tear on that joint with everything I was doing.
See how safe mountain climbing is, by the way?
So, here I am 66 and I'm not ready to settle back into my rocking chair. In fact, I told Dawn, mentioned, I said 100 years ago we'd be in wheelchairs, but I think even 50 years ago we'd be in wheelchairs instead of being able to get a part replaced, get the rehab, get the surgery, and get back out there and keep going. And so that's kind of what I want to do. And so I'm having the ankle redone, and we'll see what happens.
And then hopefully Leon is going to move into a non-impact sport, which is possibly long-distance bike riding, because, if you ride bicycles on highways, nothing bad can happen there.
No.
So, you can have all that.
Might join Dawn on a mountain. You never know.
Oh, yes. Yes, like I said, mountain climbing or hiking up large mountains at very high altitudes is totally, completely safe, especially, when you have the kind of balance that I do. All right, Leon, I want to know a little bit more about some of the hardware and some of the hardware that they're planning on putting in, how they're actually going to do this surgery to what is effectively rebuilding your foot as well as your ankle. And fortunately, it's only one of them. But how are they going to get the hardware out? Why is it possible? I mean, the bone is grown over it completely. And tell me more about that. If you say you can.
Well, so they're gonna open it up. Normally, that kind of surgery, everything's done minimally invasive these days. But because they are having to remove hardware, it's going to be a little bit more than minimally invasive. And they're going to essentially chisel out, to use a gross term. It's obviously not that gross a surgery, but they're going to skillfully remove the screw and the plates that are protruding into the joint space. Similar to what they did. Oh, by the way, to backtrack, my knee replacement has been replaced. I've had two of them in the same knee.
So, forgot about that along with the hip.
And they had to do the same thing. They had to take all the old hardware out, and they basically said it's like carpentry. And they had to take all that stuff out, reshape the bone, put new stuff in. And that's essentially what they're going to do with the ankle. They're going to with the surgeon's skill, use carpentry to pull all that stuff out, and then they're going to have to sever the Achilles to release the calcaneus.
So are they going to have to go all the way through your entire Achilles, or just partial, so they can do one of these internal brace types of procedures like happened with Aaron Rodgers and Kobe, so they will heal faster?
That I'm not exactly sure on, and that's going to be discussed when I see the surgeon this coming week. But he said they're going to have to sever. So sever to me means a complete cut, but he used the word sever. The Achilles to get a release on the calcaneus, which is the heel bone, and move it properly underneath the ankle so everything in the foot's aligned. Right now it's cocked off to one side. And then obviously take out the hardware as we mentioned. I've got some bone chips floating around in there. They're going to take
why
out.
not? Bring them into it too.
So, essentially it's going to be a rebuild of the foot to fix all the foot deformities before they can even think about doing the replacement of the joint.
But in both cases, there's another aspect of your biology that you have a significant advantage over me. Those long-term listeners of the Don Sullivan Show know very well that I have a hybrid diabetic condition, and that has caused my bone density to be not so great. I'm in the early stages of osteopenia, although I'm very strong and I can do a lot of things, obviously. But I do have that. Leon, you don't have that particular affliction.
No, in fact, I've got really good bone density. When they replaced my knee, they normally use hardware that is specially designed for, they call them, it's called a revision. When they're doing a revision, they use hardware that has these long anchor stems that go up your femur. You can't see me, but I'm pointing to Don, showing him that travels up your femur and down your tibia. But my bone density was such that they were able to use the original equipment as if I was getting a first-time knee replacement. So that should bode well, and I tend to heal very quickly. So
the same thing is going to happen with your ankle. They're going to have to chisel, as you said, and dig out the existing hardware and carefully avoid any conditions that might cause a bone infection, which would be game over for your foot, to be honest. And then replace that with much lighter and stronger hardware that existed the first time it was.
Some of that hardware that was put in there, the condition that warranted that, the fractures, has been healed now. Some of it's been healed, improperly, and then osteoarthritis has continued to cause a degradation of that repair.
And they can clean up the chondromalacia just while they're at it,
right,
while they're in there.
So some of the hardware won't go back in the same way because those fractures that's ancient history now. They've been healed. They're just going to take the hardware out now. That's not doing anything but causing me pain and grief. So that'll all come out. But then there'll be new hardware that'll be put in as a result of everything they're going to be doing to rebuild that joint. So I have that to look forward to.
So we're looking at over a year here. And what hopefully Leon is going to do is get the same ankle braces that I have, which are brilliantly designed, that are customized so that he will never turn his ankle again when he's doing anything athletic, particularly in the future endeavors of long-distance biking. That sound about right there, Leon?
Yeah, I haven't given up on the rowing yet, though.
I haven't totally given up on the rowing yet, though.
Now,
despite the fact that he's only got 1 out of 6 rotating cuff muscles remaining intact. His major league pitching potential is probably limited.
Well, that would be a limitation. So, but yeah, I mean, as I'm moving into, I'm 66 now, and as I'm moving into these years, I do need to. I'm finally. This was the first year, Don, where I actually had to make concessions to Father Time. Prior to this year, I didn't feel like anything was slowing me down.
Dan Gnarly SOB is undefeated. We're going to hold him off for a little while.
But we're going to go down swinging.
Even LeBron and Tom Brady are going to eventually realize they're in their 40s.
Yep. But we're going to go down swinging. But yeah, in light of that, I've noticed that I can't. There are some limitations that I'm becoming aware of, and I don't see it as conceding to those limitations as much as I see it as finding workarounds. And I think to continue to be an athlete, a lifelong athlete like Don and I have been, I think it's not only about training and understanding the complexities and nuances of specifically how to train for a specific thing, but I think it's also about learning how to manage your body. And nobody, I've been in a lot of races where I get to the starting line and everybody on that starting line has something going on. In age group, I'm competing against other old men. And everybody has something going on. In fact, I was at a race this spring and I'm in the locker room changing, I'm in the stall, and I'm putting mentholatum, deep heating rub all over everything. And I hear someone walk into the locker room and he goes, it smells like Masters rowers. And it's because, we all have something that we're dealing with. And in many cases,
I love the smell of Masters rowers in the morning.
Yeah, it smells like
sounds
mentholatum.
like victory.
And
it smells like 15. Sorry.
and so I think it's all that to say. I think it's as much about managing your body and knowing where your limits are, pushing limits, but knowing where they are.
What do you mean by managing your body? And I will cage, or I'll change the context of that question into one that says, what would you do differently from the beginning? Or are you just referring to what you should be doing differently, or what you plan on doing right now to manage what's left of your body, which I should be doing?
Well, to go all the way back, when I first started lifting heavy, I would have done a lot more work on prehabbing my rotator cuffs. I didn't do anything.
Prehabbing, that is a good term.
I
listen to that, audience of the Don Sullivan Show. Prehabbing, in other words, preparation for inevitable rehab, because you are putting enormous strains on your body if you want to be good at this stuff.
Yeah, and I didn't do any of the, and I see young kids in there now that are lifting, that are doing a lot of shoulder work, prehabbing their shoulders, getting them good and warmed up, stretching them properly.
Full range of motion.
Full range of motion.
Most important thing in my experience.
And I didn't do any of that. I would, I don't have time for that. I'd get in there and I'd do a quick warm up set, and then I'd go right into it. And I felt like more is better, and more isn't always better. Sometimes you have to know when it's just right. And I've learned over the years now that the idea of training is to overload a system just enough to produce a response. And once you've done that, anything more than that, you're venturing into overtraining and injury. And so I wish I had known that. I would just push and push and push and push and push, get hurt and ignore it, and try to be the tough guy and push through it, and I would damage things.
All the time we were training in track and field, Leon, I think you remember this, particularly about me, but yourself as well, that my frame of mind was to run myself into the ground, and if I could stand up at the end of a workout, I was something less than courageous.
Yeah, and what they're saying now, and I think it's right. I mean, I still actually listen to a lot of podcasts on how 1,500 meter milers are training, because that's essentially the same time. They're doing it at a mile in around 4 minutes, 1,500 in around 3. Well, the really good ones 3:30. And so I'm copying a lot of my training from concepts of what they're doing, and what they're saying now, what they're doing now, is they know how far to push to get that training stimulus and to elicit a response, and they won't go further because they have to live to fight again another day. And we didn't know how to do that. We knew fight with everything you have today, and we'll worry about tomorrow. And eventually that catches up. So having said all of that, as you become an aging athlete, you can't continue to train like that. You can't. And so you learn how to train. You learn what you're like right now with my shoulders the way they are. I can't do heavy benching. So I'm not doing heavy benching. I'm doing other things with dumbbells that still stimulate the muscles around the pectoralis major, minor, and the anterior deltoids that I need. But I'm doing it, and it's not heavy weight. It's not any kind of ego weight where I can walk out of the gym and feel like...
That's a real problem, the ego thing. I know it is for me. I love the fact that I can bench press right now if I want to over my weight at 63 years old. But that's the wrong mentality, isn't it?
It is the wrong mentality, because at our age, it doesn't mean we can't do things. It means we have to be smart about it.
We shouldn't do it. There's better things, more optimal approaches.
And going to your maximum on those kind of things, particularly with weights. And as we get older, our ability to recover is less. Our tendons are more brittle. They're not as pliable, and your bone structure, especially like in your case, Don, with the osteopenia, all you're doing is you are going well past that point where you've elicited a stimulus. You're going well past that, and now you're going into overtraining. And so the body, it's kind of like, I've heard an analogy of somebody who's has a house and a hurricane hits it. And you go out and you put a new roof on it. So that's the hurricane is the exercise, is the stress that you're putting on it with training. Putting the new roof on it is your body's ability to recover. Well, what happens is if you get this hurricane and you run out there, you put a new roof on, the next day another hurricane comes, you run out there, you put a new roof on, another hurricane comes, and you don't have time to put a new roof on, you're just patching it, and another hurricane comes, and pretty soon you don't have a roof up there at all. Well, the hurricane is that repeated stress that you continue to put on the body, and you never give yourself a chance to go up on the roof and fix the roof, which is your body's ability to respond to the stimulus that you've just created. And that's true whether you're 20 or whether you're 66 like I am. It's more true when you're 66 than when you're 20, because when you're 20 you have the ability to recover quicker. It's especially true for us now. I used to be able to do a really hard workout every other day, and the in-between days do something of volume. Now it's about every third day.
You need more rest, which really means recovery.
Yes, and it doesn't mean you don't do anything on the in-between days, but you work on different systems. So if I'm doing anaerobic work, speed work, high intensity sprint work in the boat as a rower, I'm not going to follow that the next day with anything but a long, nice, slow row where I'm getting my heart rate up to maybe 70%, and that's it. And just putting in the miles. Same thing with weight training. You wouldn't go in there and lift really, really heavy and then follow it the next day and lift really, really heavy again. You need to give
This is just breaking yourself down all the time.
You're never.
And honestly, folks, when you see people in the gym doing that, no matter what age they're at, those are the people who are doing steroids, because they are able to recover day to day, and the human body just can't do that. It needs multiple days, 48 hours, even if you're 20 years old and in great shape, to recover from that type of damage that you're doing when you're lifting heavy weights, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, and even 72 hours. So I'll break up my body into
now we need weeks of that.
into sections. So I'm able to lift every day, but I'm dividing it up in such a way that I'm not hitting that same body part for about 72 hours. So I'm giving myself that kind of time for my body to recover. And when it's time to go again, it's also important to listen to my body. If my body is telling me it's just not there, is it my mind that just doesn't want to work out, or is it my body just not there? And if it's not there, then I'll do something else. And that's important too. So reading your body, listening to your body, and working around your injuries. I can't do heavy squats anymore. So I do other exercises.
I have my doubts that anybody should ever be doing heavy squats. Note to my niece Shannon, who will be on this at some point.
I think there's a place for it if it's done right, and you're keeping your ego out of it. The way I used to squat was very ego driven. I mean, the whole sport of bodybuilding is anyway. But now I've got herniations. Oh, that's the other injuries I talked about. Herniations.
We forgot a few.
Herniations all up and down my spine, and so I can't do anything that loads my spine.
Fusion's on the way.
So I have to know that, and so I have to work around that. Deadlifts are out, but I need to do other exercises that will stimulate what the deadlift is working. And so I'll do other exercises around that. Same thing with squatting. Same thing with benching, because of my injuries. And I can still maintain pretty good muscle mass with light dumbbells working around it and creating a situation where the body doesn't know, how much weight's on the bar, or how much is, it knows the movement. So I'm able to do that.
So, Leon, let me go off in a different direction here with this question. And I'll preface it with a statement as a coach myself and as somebody who's been doing this for a long time, as you have. I've really come to a conclusion that absent using your own body weight, and this is a note to all you football coaches out there and baseball coaches, especially those who have aspiring pitchers, I don't think kids, meaning anybody under about 16, should be doing anything with any actual weights before 16 at all.
100%.
And I think they should be doing push-ups and sit-ups, body weight type of work, but just not anything with, and that's not just because they can hurt themselves with it. It's because their bodies aren't formed, their tendons aren't formed well enough, particularly pitchers. But the big football players, even a 16-year-old who weighs 260 pounds, they shouldn't be doing any real weightlifting. But of course, that's an anathema to what 99% of football coaches would think. What do you think, Leon?
Absolutely. In fact, the growth plates in the bones, in the joints, they've shown that those growth plates are not even closed until you're at least 18.
So you think 18 is probably even a better number?
I think after 16 you could probably introduce some light training, and the beauty of that is you're training kids to train properly.
Yeah.
And you're training them to not get the ego involved. You're training them. The weight training is a means to an end. It's not an end in itself. And I know that powerlifting notwithstanding, that's a whole different subject. I mean, a kid 16 shouldn't be powerlifting anyway, in my opinion. They're just setting themselves up for all kinds of problems.
Or even just trying to get big to be able to play for Alabama in a couple of years as a defensive lineman.
I would say, after 16, you can cautiously begin to do some training. But prior to that, your body is still growing. The tendons have not made full attachment yet in the joint space. The growth plates are still open. So I think you're asking, you're telling a kid if he's doing that, he's setting himself up for problems when he gets to 30s, 40s, 50s.
So, Leon, I want to sort of end this episode on a really profound question. And of course, we at the Don Sullivan Show try to make light of every subject as much as possible. But there are some moments in which we really think of them, and we try to approach the subject with as much seriousness as it deserves, which loyal listeners know well. And obviously, I've kind of made light of this subject by referring to Leon as the Bionic Man, which I think he is, because he is incredibly strong and capable and always has been for the 45 years that I have known him. But given that point, Leon, you can talk a little bit about this. Would you do anything differently, both on a micro level and a macro level? Is there anything you wouldn't do in terms of the sports that you participated in? And is there, obviously there are things you would do differently training-wise, which we've already talked about, but is there anything you do differently with your life? And the reason I ask that is I'm always wondering if your average NFL player who played for 6 years and experienced what is the equivalent of about 20,000 car wrecks at 20 miles an hour, I always wondered if they were 20 years old and they were looking at 22 years old, they're looking at their first NFL contract, and if you could put them in their 50-year-old body for 1 minute, would they actually sign that contract or go do something else? What do you think?
That's a loaded question, because on one hand,
it was meant to be.
Because on one hand, I am a product of all of my prior experiences. So to change all of that would be be changing who I am. Here's what I think I would change. I think I would still play football, even with that injury. I loved it at the time, although I didn't play beyond high school. And so if I had played football and got injured, I would still have that issue. So the knee issue probably would still have been there. However, the other injuries, the herniations all up and down my spine, my hip, my shoulders, I would have could completely have avoided had I understood the concept of training to get a stimulus, to get a response, and then that's it. And that more isn't always better, and pushing all the way to my maximum every freaking day and just grinding myself into the ground, literally ground me into the ground. And so,
yeah, and the same thing is absolutely true with me, mostly from a aerobic and running perspective, but the other sports as well that I participated in. I wasn't a power lifter of any note, but I lift a lot and have for 50 years. And Leon and I have just been talking these last few days about chronic problems I'm having with my back, and I am going to need to adjust and stop trying to be as strong as I was, 30 years ago. But I can still climb mountains the way I do.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're talking about when you're talking about learning to manage your body. So you're going to still continue to work, but you're going to work with what your body is giving you. You're not going to demand from your body what it can't. So that's what I would change.
Well, thank you, Mr. Leon Jones, the Bionic Man. I think this was an incredibly insightful and wonderful reunion of us on the Don Sullivan Show, and I think that you provided a tremendous amount of insight, mostly for the young athletes and coaches out there in all sports, not just football and track and field and even baseball. And we're going to have separate shows about pitching, a lot of them, as we move along in these series of athletics, that we will we'll have discussions about pitching and other other specific athletic activities and so on. But I think we provided a tremendous amount of individual insight from very personal and very in-depth experience overall. So thank you, Leon.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure to talk to you about this, Don.
And so, folks, remember, please listen in every week, or even more than every week, and download all of the shows, we'll be back next week with something completely different. And remember one very important thing, that all at-bats are situational. Until next time.